Hi everybody, I'm Bear. Today I would like to talk to you about German guys with an eye patch. That's right, we're talking about Drosselmeier, and he is the main character in Hiddensee by Gregory Maguire. I always thought that the eye patch made Drosselmeier look kind of sinister, but yeah, he's not. He's just a toy maker. He made the Nutcracker. It's kind of boring when you think about it. In the ballet, Drosselmeyer's kind of like that friend of the family that shows up on Christmas Eve and gathers all the children around and tells them an hour and a half long story. Meanwhile, you're bored out of your mind, you've lost your eggnog buzz, and you're just wanting to go to bed by the time that thing's over. Yeah, that's kind of Drosselmeyer and the ballet. But before we get into the book, I would like to remind you that this channel is all about taking any YouTube proceeds that we gather once we're monetized and giving those proceeds to local libraries and literacy programs. So if you like that idea, please subscribe. All right, let's get to the book itself. Published on October 31st, 2017. Gregory Maguire, the author, is the same guy that wrote the Wicked series. So, this is kind of his wheelhouse of taking a familiar story and reimagining it. And in this case, he's reimagined Drosselmeier, the character from the Nutcracker. So let me start with the things I really liked about this novel. First, Maguire's writing style as prose is fresh. It's kind of it's light, and I think it's light because he really excels at fantasy. And here you have a lot of fantasy elements in the story. I mean, you've got the Black Forest. It's very fairy tale-like. Dangerous wolves, magical creatures. You have the idea of a forest within a forest that's even more magical, that's migrated from the Oracle of Delphi in Greece all the way up north into Germany. And so these fantasy elements are really delightful. Maguire excels at that. That's his wheelhouse, obviously. I think Maguire did an excellent job at drafting Drosselmeier. Even though I didn't particularly like the character, I understand what Maguire was going for, and I think he nailed it. So with Drosselmeier, he's unfairly unloved. He's just kind of wanted nowhere for the vast majority of his life, and I think Maguire really brings that home with these kind of superficial attachments that he has. He attaches himself to Mrs. Pfeiffer, the Persian beauty, but it's more the attachment is in his heart and in his mind than it is in hers. He has, frankly, latent homosexual feelings towards his best friend Felix that are never expressed. And frankly, I don't think Drosselmeier ever understood it himself, because I think he has a lack of self-awareness of what he needs as a person. And if that's what Maguire was going for, in comparison to the Drosselmeier you see in the Nutcracker, where he's very lively and he's, expressively telling a story about the Nutcracker to captivated children, that's not Maguire's Drosselmeier. Drosselmeier is kind of boring, dull. He's misunderstood because he misunderstands himself, and he's just kind of got no place in the world. That's Maguire's Drosselmeier. If that's what he was going for, he nailed it. Maguire really nails Drosselmeier's character in 3 sentences. Drosselmeier, thinking about his own life, says this: he spent a life making toys. There's that. But what of it? Exactly. What of it? What is the meaning of Drosselmeier's life? Maguire doesn't explain what it is, and that's the point, I think. So here's a couple things I didn't like about the novel. I felt that Hiddensee really failed to entrance the reader. I mean, you have this glorious opportunity, this fairy tale-like opportunity to create this magical world, and instead you get Drosselmeier, humdrum, drifting here and there. It's just, for me, it was a lost opportunity. And one thing I really didn't like as a device in this novel is that he skips forward in a way that just isn't pleasing. What I mean by that is that you'll be reading about this main character, And then a paragraph later, it's 3 years later, and that main character has died. There's no explanation for it or anything like that. And he does that 3 times with main significant characters. I just don't understand the device. I think he could have done better in just addressing the death of a main character a little bit better. Let it creep up on you a little bit so you know it's coming. And don't get me wrong, there's aspects of Hiddensee that make the Nutcracker story a little engaging because we get a little bit more of a backstory. But frankly, there's nothing about the Nutcracker itself that's unusual. There's no emotional attachment that Maguire creates with Drosselmeier himself. I literally felt nothing about the character. I didn't have strong feelings one way or the other. He just kind of is. And like I said earlier, maybe that's Maguire's point, but I just personally couldn't form an emotional attachment. And the last thing I'll point out has to do with the background of this video. See these Christmas stockings? The subject being Christmas. This was recommended as a Christmas read. And in a sense it is, because the subject matter is the Nutcracker story, at least Drosselmeier's part in that. However, I mean, you don't really get to any context of Christmas until the last 20% of this novel. So what I'm telling you is that if you're looking at this novel as a potential Christmas read, I'm going to say that it is, but it isn't. It is in the last 20% of the novel, but for the most part, it kind of isn't. And so with all that in mind, I'm going to rate this at 3.25 stars out of 5. It's slightly above average as a novel, and it's slightly above average because Maguire is obviously a talented author. I think this novel could have been improved if there would have been a little bit more fantasy elements to it, and if perhaps Maguire might have drafted a little bit more substance into Drosselmeier himself. I feel like Drosselmeier was acted upon by all the external influences in his life rather than being a true protagonist and actually taking some ownership and acting forward himself. And so I think with a little bit more rounding out of Drosselmeier and some of the other characters, a emphasis on some of the fantasy elements of this novel, and maybe creating more significance in the Nutcracker itself, I think Maguire would have drafted a better novel. But I do still think that it's a worthy read. You know, if you can pick this novel up at a reasonable price, read it. Right about now, you're going to see a little circle. That was a picture of me taken a long time ago when I was a naval officer. And if you click on that, you can subscribe. And your subscription will get us just one tiny step closer to monetizing this channel so we can get money to public libraries and literacy programs. With that, I wish you a great day. God bless.